The hidden psychology of people who prefer never to leave their home. There are people who feel something inside them sink the moment they hear the words, "Let's go out tonight." Not because they hate people, not because they are bitter, not because they are lazy, but because the very thought of leaving the house, getting dressed, entering noise, answering questions, reacting at the right moments, smiling with the right amount of warmth already feels like spending energy they do not have. And that is the part most people never understand. From the outside, it looks small. A declined invitation, a cancelled plan, a quiet weekend, another evening spent alone. But from the inside, it is never just that. It is relief. It is the body exhaling. It is the nervous system finally realizing it does not have to brace itself anymore. Because for some people, home is not just where they live. It is where they return to themselves. It is the one place where nothing is being pulled out of them. No performance, no noise, no emotional traffic. No need to translate who they are into something easier for other people to handle. And if you are one of these people, you probably know exactly what that feels like. The click of the door closing behind you, the silence settling back into the room, the strange softness that returns to your chest when the world is no longer asking anything from you. That feeling is not random. There is psychology in it. There is history in it. There is a reason some people feel most alive. Not in crowds, not in bars, not in movement, but in the quiet corners of their own home. The world likes to interpret this the wrong way. It sees someone staying in and immediately creates a story. They must be antisocial. They must be hiding. They must be depressed. They must be missing out. But the truth is often much deeper than that. Some people do not stay home because they are avoiding life. They stay home because life finally feels emotionally honest there. At home, they can think one thought all the way through. At home, they do not have to wear a face. At home, they are not constantly reading the room, measuring their tone, adjusting their energy, making sure they are acceptable. At home, they are not performing normal. And that matters more than people think. Because one of the hidden reasons some people prefer staying home is not that they dislike human connection. It is that they are exhausted by the invisible labor around it. The small talk, the forced enthusiasm, the scripted politeness, the empty conversations that require real energy and return almost nothing. To some people, those things are harmless. To others, they are draining in a way that is hard to explain. They leave the house for 2 hours and come back feeling like something essential has been taken out of them. Not because anything terrible happened, but because their mind never stopped processing. The noise, the faces, the unpredictability, the social calculations, the subtle tension of being perceived. And what makes this even more isolating is that they often function well enough that nobody sees the cost. They show up, they work, they respond, they do what is necessary, so the world assumes they are fine. But functioning is not the same as feeling at ease. A person can handle something and still pay heavily for it. That is what many people who prefer staying home have been trying to explain without having the language for it. They are not incapable. They are not weak. They are just paying more mentally, more emotionally, more physically, more internally. And when that cost repeats over years, the mind begins to favor what feels sustainable. Quiet, privacy, control, familiarity, peace. Home becomes more than a building. It becomes regulation. It becomes the only place where the system finally stops scanning. And often, this pattern starts much earlier than adulthood. Sometimes it begins in childhood, in ways that looked harmless at the time. A child who spent a lot of time alone. A child who learned to entertain themselves. A child who discovered that solitude was not frightening at all. It was rich. It was safe. It was theirs. They built private worlds, private rituals, private joys. They learned that being alone did not mean being empty. And for some, the roots go even deeper. Maybe the outside world never felt emotionally easy. Maybe school felt humiliating. Maybe social spaces felt loud and false. Maybe home was the only environment where they could predict what came next. Maybe their room was the only place where they could let their guard down. If that happens often enough, the mind learns a powerful equation. Outside means demand. Inside means relief. And once that lesson settles into the nervous system, it does not disappear just because someone becomes an adult. It follows them, quietly, into relationships, into work, into how they spend their weekends, into the strange guilt they sometimes feel for wanting nothing more than to stay home and be left alone. But here is the important part. Wanting peace is not the same thing as being broken. Needing less stimulation is not a character flaw. Some people are simply built with a more sensitive relationship to input. They feel more, notice more, absorb more. They are not always more fragile. Sometimes they are more porous, more affected by chaos, more aware of tension, more easily depleted by environments that other people walk through without thinking. This is why home can feel almost sacred to them, not because it is glamorous, but because it is gentle. The lighting is familiar, the sounds are predictable, the emotional temperature is finally manageable. Nothing is lunging at their attention. Nothing is asking them to become more animated, more available, more social than they really are. Home lets them drop back into their natural shape. And that return can feel almost holy, especially in a world that constantly rewards the opposite. Go out more, network more, post more, be seen more, be louder, be busier, be easier to consume. For people who genuinely prefer staying home, that pressure creates a quiet kind of shame. Because after hearing it long enough, they start to wonder, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel relief when plans get canceled? Why do I feel more like myself in silence than in company? Why do I need so much time alone just to feel normal again? Those questions hurt because they are not really about lifestyle. They are about worth. They are about whether a person is allowed to exist in a quieter way without being treated as incomplete. And maybe that is why this subject touches people so deeply. Because many of them were never actually ashamed of loving home. They were ashamed of being misunderstood for it. They were ashamed of how often the world confused peace with failure. Still, there is a truth here that cannot be ignored, a very important one. Home can be a sanctuary, and if you are not careful, it can also become a cage. That is the paradox. The same place that protects you can also slowly shrink your life. The same silence that heals you can become the silence you hide inside. The same relief that restores you can become the relief that teaches your mind never to risk discomfort again. And that is how avoidance begins. Quietly, not with drama, not with a collapse, with relief. You stay home once because you are tired, then again because it feels better, then again because the thought of going out feels heavier now. And eventually the outside world does not just feel draining. It starts to feel harder, louder, more difficult, more foreign. This is the line people rarely talk about. The difference between chosen solitude and fear-based retreat. From the outside, they can look identical, but inside, they are very different experiences. Chosen solitude feels grounding. Avoidance feels tightening. Chosen solitude returns you to yourself. Avoidance makes the world feel progressively less possible. Chosen solitude says, this is where I recover. Avoidance says, this is the only place I can survive. That is why the deepest question is not whether someone likes staying home. The real question is this: is home helping them become more themselves or less free to be themselves anywhere else? That question changes everything, because the goal is not to force a quiet person into becoming loud. The goal is not to shame someone for needing peace. The goal is not to glorify constant exposure as if burnout is proof of health. The goal is freedom, real freedom, the kind where you can stay home because you want to, not because fear has reduced your world to one safe room. And that means healing for this kind of person looks very different from what the world assumes. It does not mean turning into a social butterfly. It does not mean suddenly loving crowds. It does not mean becoming endlessly available. It means learning how to protect your peace without disappearing into it. It means knowing the difference between restoration and retreat. It means asking yourself gently and honestly, when I stay home, do I feel nourished or just temporarily relieved? Do I feel more whole or just less activated? Am I choosing peace or obeying dread? That kind of honesty is powerful because it removes shame and replaces it with clarity. And clarity is where change begins. Sometimes the answer is that your love of home is healthy. It is the place where you think clearly, create honestly, rest deeply, reconnect with your inner life. If that is true, honor it. There is nothing small about a life that does not betray your nervous system. But if your home has become the only place where your body believes you are safe, then compassion must become action. Not violent action, not self-attack, just small returns to freedom. A walk, a quiet errand, a place with low stimulation, a conversation with one safe person, a gentle widening of the world. Not because the world deserves unlimited access to you, but because fear should not own your map. And maybe that is the deepest truth of all. The people who prefer never to leave their home are often not empty, withdrawn, or disconnected. Many of them are deeply alive, deeply observant, deeply self-aware. They have built rich interior worlds because they had to, because they learned early that meaning can exist in silence, that joy can exist without an audience, that a life can be full even when it is quiet. There is beauty in that, real beauty, but there is also responsibility in it, because peace should not cost you your freedom. So if you are someone who feels most like yourself when the door closes behind you, hear this carefully. You are not lazy. You are not strange. You are not broken for loving stillness more than spectacle. You are not wrong for needing less noise, less performance, less emotional traffic. Just make sure the home you love remains a place of return, not a place of disappearance. Because the healthiest version of home is not where you hide from life forever. It is where you recover enough strength to meet life on your own terms. And that is a very different thing.